We started a business. The rates that we were charging back then, talking a moment ago pre-stage about cringe, and we charged, if you get to a point where the opportunities are coming quite freely and you've got more opportunities than you actually need, then I realized that we had way too many clients. So I said it also means that they're less likely to take actual strategic sit down conversations with you. They're not going to see you as a, so we went, what do we want this business to become?
Hello everyone and welcome to this very special episode of It's Always the Human. Now regular watchers will know this is the show where we like to talk about those more human elements. We get away from the tech for a moment. We look behind the scenes and we talk about some of the human factors in our lovely ecosystem of all things MSP. I'm really excited to have my guest on today, Joe Burns, who has a fascinating story. Has come from an MSP that perhaps wasn't performing as well as his current ones, has moved to a much better model, and he's basically the co-founder of Reformed IT and also runs MSP Blueprint, helping other MSPs. With all sorts of things, pricing and sort of PSA setups and all sorts of weird and wonderful things that MSPs need help with these days. I'm also joined by guest Nihil, CRO at usecure. Joe, welcome to the show. I'm glad we finally managed to get you on.
Yes, thanks for having me, James. I appreciate it. And yes, it's good to finally actually get to do this.
Brilliant. Listen, we touched very briefly on your kind of history, and this is the bit that really stood out when I was thinking, what am I going to ask Joe when he finally comes on? It's the journey. It's the fact that today we're talking all about pricing. This is our topic of today, and we're going to cover all things to do with why are people not so confident when it comes to the value that they offer and charging what they're worth. And I think you can probably relate to that. You started with Pyranet, and the growth was not as quick as it has been with Reformed IT. So can we talk a little bit about the early days at Pyranet, perhaps, and some of the things that you were doing there?
Yeah. So. Co-founded a company called Pyranet UK, based in Nottingham in the UK, and that was back in 2005 with a business partner. Up until that point, obviously, like many MSP founders, I was just working in IT for a much bigger company, for a corporate essentially. And you figure that you can go and do this for other businesses, charge them money and start your own IT services businesses, because we weren't really called MSP back in 2005, but we were very much an MSP model. So when we started that business back in 2005, we started pretty much day one on a per device based charge. We did a support package, and it was a per device based charge. And
that was quite innovative, wasn't it, at the time? Because I mean, that would have been all break fix in those days, I'd have thought.
Yeah, I hear that a lot about break fix back then. I'm like, we've never, in my experience of 20 plus years of running IT services businesses, I've never actually done break fix.
Just never went down that route.
Yeah.
Okay. So you just straight out of the gate just said, right, okay, when I do my projections, I want to have a recurring model, and that's exactly where you started.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But back then, again, lessons are just like pretty much most MSP particularly first time MSP founders. We were techies. We started a business. We didn't really know anything to do with business. So the rates that we were charging back then, we were just talking a moment ago pre-stage about cringe, and we charged, I think it was £9 per desktop to support people back then. £9 per desktop.
And who supported you in those days? Because it wasn't your customers.
Yeah, and so again we started that business. It did grow. We grew every year. The whole time we were running that business, we did grow every single year throughout. We eventually exited that business, sold the business in 2016, but we had growth every single year. But it just wasn't rapid growth, but we had growth back then.
Okay. And so in those days, and how was it in terms of you aligning your pricing perhaps with the value that you offer, and how did you sort of come up with that pricing, and did it evolve over the period? I mean, you were doing, so Pyranet was around for quite a while, wasn't it? How did the journey go there?
Yeah, so how we came up with our price in the first place, and again, it's something I talk about quite a lot more recently, is we I remember the very first task that I did starting that business was to get on the phone and do some competitor research. So I called around all the other IT companies in the area and basically just asked, what are you doing? Pretend you're a business, and how much would you charge for this? How much would you charge for that? Wrote all of the prices down that we were getting from everybody else and how they were doing it. So that then we thought, oh well, we'll go somewhere amongst that because that sounds right. That's what other people are doing effectively. So yeah, and it did evolve obviously over time. You learn more as you build a business and you grow, and you realize how these things work. Particularly to the later before we sold, the last couple of years, business started to make more sense to me. I properly started to understand how we should be doing things, and we went through the same issues that I would imagine a lot of MSPs go through, which is, I always call it the Seesaw Effect. We were hiring technicians because we were too busy. We had clients and we were too busy, so we'd hire some more technicians. Yeah. And then ultimately, once you've got them in, you're like, we can't afford them. We need more clients. So you go and get more clients, and then you need more. And it was just a battle. We were pedaling harder just to stay still, I like to say.
And what was that like in terms of your team internally? Were you sort of having debates internally about, oh, this can't carry on? Were you sort of trying to think of different ways to get around this at the time, or how were the conversations?
I mean, it was high pressure. In the reformed business that I run now, I've got 2 co-founders in that business. Both of those co-founders used to work in the Pyranet business, and we talk now about how different experience it is for the people in, because it was intense back then. As you can imagine, we're pedal to the metal all the time. It's constant. We're playing catch up constantly, and so there's a lot more pressure with everyone in the team, and you're more likely to make mistakes. When you're under severe pressure and when you're limited on resource, limited on time, you're more likely to make mistakes, and obviously that impacts service.
Nihil, we've got you on, and as CRO, I'm sure you're thinking along the lines of, how did the sales team look at this point, and how does sales factor in, maybe?
Yeah, and also, I suppose a knock-on effect to a salesperson about if they feel like their services are undervalued, does that have an impact on their? I suppose if you then try to ramp up the pricing, their confidence in then saying, okay, we're going to make that jump, or while it is undervalued, does it make them feel almost like their services internally aren't being, I suppose, appreciated or being fairly priced externally? How does it impact the internal morale of the sales team to have a service that they feel may be undervalued?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one. When you've got the sales service, you often, once you departmentalize those two things, for a period of time, as a startup MSP, usually this is done by the owners. The owners are kind of doing everything from a sales perspective. They're probably quite heavily involved in an operational side of the business, so they've got their fingers on everything and they feel everything. I think once you start to departmentalize the business, it grows, and you've got a separate sales section. There's this risk. And, we've seen it historically, that you get a them and us situation. The sales team are focused on going and making sales and, either new business. And when there's new business and you've got a team that's already busy, the rest of the team do not want new business, because they're like, we're already busy, we're already staffed.
That's such a crazy conflict, isn't it?
Yeah. And then even with farming and projects and things like that, selling existing projects, it's the sales team are glad that they're going and delivering the sales, because that's their task. But the service team are constantly felt like they're being put under pressure because of it. So it's tricky, because you've got that balance you've got to try and get of those two teams, so that everyone feels they're on the same goal. They're all going in the same direction and wanting the same things.
I'm interested to know. So obviously you sold to Townley, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So and you stayed on there. So did you? So at the end of your time at sort of Pyranet, was there kind of like did you feel like there's a mindset shift at that point, or did you just carry on and just thought, okay, I'll just continue as I am? And did anything change at that point?
Yeah, it did change. So the reason we ended up selling the business, I kind of say it was an accidental sale, in the sense that we didn't really set out to go and sell the business. What happened is we grew the business over 11 years, and it was going well. Generally, it was going well, and we were growing the business. We were performing. Obviously, we had the difficulties, like I've explained, like trying to balance, people and clients and get those ratios right. But we were doing well as a business. I think what ultimately happened is, it was me and a business partner, a guy called Rory, and we'd always had this really good yin yang style relationship where I was always quite ambitious and wanted to drive. Rory was was more cautious and more risk averse, and what that did for the relationship, for the business, is it helped to centralize us into somewhere that was between the two. So if it was just down to me, it could be seen that I would take too many risks and that would derail it. Whereas if we didn't have my ambition and my drive, then it might have been, we wouldn't have had the growth that we got. So it kind of counterbalanced each other out in terms of where we were. There was a line between us. But I think what happened over the course of the years is I became more, like, the more I got into this, the more ambitious I became. And from Rory's perspective, I think he was feeling that the business was doing really well, so we're in a secure position. So his ability to kind of de-risk was there as well. So we were almost going in different directions in terms of our attitude to risk and what we wanted out of the business for a long
There's definitely a sweet spot, isn't there? There's definitely a sweet spot that you operate in for a while. Do you see this, with your, obviously you're coaching lots of MSPs these days on the MSP blueprint side of things. Do you see that that's a really successful makeup, but that maybe only lasts a little while? Because I've got to say, even from my side, having worked in various organisations, I've seen exactly that same thing, and also it applies to sort of product development as well. Someone who really wants to just push on rather than focus on sort of the stability side of things. Do you think that's a formula for success, to have those two kind of roles?
It could be, but again, the reflection looking back at the journey is which one should trump, or where
you're a bit better on your own, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. If you're on your own, you're obviously making all the decisions. That I've always been. It's funny because you could look at that experience, the fact we sold the business and we had these different directions that we wanted to go, and that's ultimately what led us to selling the business, was this different mindset of what the future of the business should look like. But ultimately, I still put that down to obviously a massive success. We were co-founders for 11 years, and it worked, and we got an exit from it as well. So I always see that as a success, and I'm a big advocate of co-founders, because people say that and go, oh well, you ended up in this position where you needed to sell the business because the relationship you couldn't continue, which is true. But at the same time, without that partnership, we wouldn't have even got to that position in the first place. And so I do advocate for having co-founders. I think co-founders. I think that you can have strengths and weaknesses that complement each other. So I think that works. When you're a solo entrepreneur, you don't have somebody that's in the same position to to bounce ideas off in the same way, which is where coaching and mentoring can 100% help. You can get some of that by using a coach or a mentor as well. But yeah, I think co-founders are good. Everyone's pushing in the same direction. The one thing I did learn, obviously, from that experience is to make sure you have got realignment on regular check-ins. So to make sure that you're all the direction you want, what you want out of the business is understood by each other, and you are still in agreement. Because the earlier you can detect where there might be a misalignment, where you might be going in different directions, the earlier you can detect that, the more likely you can solve it in a much in a much easier way.
And it's funny you should say that. I'm just thinking back to so our first episode was with James Davis. I don't know if you know James from XPax8, TSP Advisory, and it was all about partnerships that go wrong. And it was exactly what he was saying as well, the alignment side of things. If it's not there, yeah, it can cause major problems. But as you say, 11 years is a good run, and I think that's pretty successful. So can I ask you a bit about the MSPs that you're talking to today, then, and what you're seeing? So where can you give us any sort of stories perhaps around where you see sort of pricing mistakes? And Nihil, I suppose you're obviously talking to lots of MSPs as well. So if any that you can recount, please feel free. But yeah, I just like to know if possible any that you come across common factors that people can relate to maybe.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, most people underprice, right? Most people underprice their services, and I think that from a psychology perspective, I think there's an element of most MSP founders are technical people that are really good at their particular skill set, right? So they're good at their skill set, they can offer it out, and that's ultimately why most stop. Not all. We can see a lot of MSPs. Generally, the faster growing MSPs that you look at that are going on in the UK are business people. they're business people who then build an MSP. They find the skill sets and they build an MSP. When we're talking to founders that are techies, essentially, they've got the skill, they've got the operational capability, and then they start a business. It's usually that they've not had so much exposure to that other side of it, the sales piece, which is really, really important, but they've not had much exposure to sales. They've not.
Where does that leave them weak, Joe? Where does that leave? Is it a case of I hear a lot, I don't really like that sales bit, and I don't really feel comfortable sort of, pushing up the pricing or charging them that. I just want to do my job kind of thing and get on with that. Is it that you're still seeing? Or?
Oh, absolutely. And again, I think from a perspective, it's funny because obviously I started in the exact same way, right? It was a tech. We were both, me and my business partner, both tech.
Yeah.
Start the job.
What's the difference?
Well, I remember learning on the job like most people do, and going out and also feeling awkward about asking people for money and I remember it was 21. I was 21 years old when we started that business, so I'm going out as a 21-year-old talking to people that have been running businesses for decades, usually quite senior to me in years and age. And I'm like, there's this young 21-year-old person thinking, no one's going to listen to me. Like, why would they listen to me? What do I know? Like, they've been running these businesses for years. Why would they even listen to me? And so, yes, there's an element of confidence that you need to build. And over time, when I started asking people and people said yes and bought, it just built my confidence up a little bit more, where I was like, actually people will listen to me, and the things that we're doing adds value, and we can see the results of what we're doing. So there's definitely a mindset confidence piece. And then the more years I did in the business, the more it grew in terms of understanding what value we delivered, the more I knew my own value. So then you get to a point where I'm like, if anyone downplays my own value, because I've got a confidence of my own value and what we represent and what we do, it was so much easier for me to go, well, the fact that you might try and belittle what we do, but that's not my problem. And so that's a you thing. And
when did that happen, Joe? At which point would you say that was in the journey? Was that still at Pyranet?
Yeah, still at Pyranet. My confidence around sales and things was built during my years at Pyranet, towards the latter 3 or 4 years when I was talking to clients. And I think some of the other major problems that we get is around, I'm a big fan of Daniel Priestley, so I'm going to call out some of his stuff, right? So the whole supply and demand tension. The issue for most is that the lack of confidence comes from the lack of opportunity. If you don't have many opportunities, you're clutching. So you do feel desperation. You feel like you've got to try and take whatever you can get. If you get to a point where the opportunities are coming quite freely and you've got more opportunities than you actually need, then it's way easier to say no to people about things. And so that gives you an element of confidence. So I think once I got to that point where I could see that I could generate opportunities, I could then pick and choose the ones that I work with. I don't feel desperate anymore. So if I don't think that we're going to add value, or they can't see the value that we represent, then it's maybe not a fit, and I'll just move on to another one.
Did you get, you said that happened at Pyranet, Joe.
Yeah.
So did you get internal kickback on what sounds like a change in mindset? If you had this, and you've spoke about being one that wants to sort of push things and be ambitious and try different things. If you have maybe a more conservative internal culture, how did you make sure you weren't going too far off piece and maybe causing a disconnect with the rest of the team?
Yeah, it wasn't really an issue, like, because most of the team, the vast majority of the team was service related, and they don't, in fact, in fairness, when you start to do this, back to my point earlier about this disconnect between sales and service don't want to be put under additional undue pressure. So when you're actively going out and going, actually, we want clients that are the right fit. We want clients that are going to treat us right when we work with them, rather than engineers go out and they treat them with disrespect and they treat them as, that they don't add value. If we're making sure that the alignment at that original conversation is good, then it actually helps the service team, and the service team feel better as a result of it as well. So I don't see it as a negative. And bearing in mind that, again, mostly from a service perspective, they just see what they need to do as the output, right? The negotiation piece doesn't really mean too much to them. The quality of the client does make a difference, though. The better the quality of the client, the better their life is, and the better experience they have.
Yeah, completely agree with your point before as well about how a lot of people in the IT space and MSPs were technical people that then try to run a business, and it's those that are growing that tend to be more business minded. And we see it quite a lot when we speak to partners and say, this is what our successful partners are doing. This is how they're licensing it. They're creating bundles. They're driving value around it. And the MSP will then say, our clients won't pay that. And when you then dig a little bit deeper, you kind of see, well, your client base is a very similar makeup to this other MSP that are getting away with it. So what's the difference in it? And I think it fundamentally quite often comes down to confidence. That there's a lot of assumptions that partners make about how their clients will react. And when we say to them, have you put any feelers out? Have you done any market research? Have you tested how far you can stretch things and still be confident in the value you're providing? It's an assumption that's underpinning it, not actual data and evidence.
And one of the things you do, Joe, is you're an advocate of when you're talking about this model, and Nihil's touched on it there, the all you can eat, which is something, and obviously we could debate whether that's the right thing to do or not, but that's it's certainly a bold move, and I'm quite interested to hear. I mean, as you said, if you've got less confidence when it comes to the sales side and you're just starting out, it can feel a little much to say, right, here's everything, that's what we're charging, like it or lump it kind of thing. At which stage did you bring that in, and do you think it's something, or at which stage, I guess, would you recommend in the sort of maturity of an MSP that you introduce that? Is it something you can start straight off with?
That's what we did, yeah. So there was a decision made when we started the business. Now the thing is, when we started Reformed, we had a very clear goal. Having built a business before, I kind of understood a bit more about how we should structure. And one of the sayings is start with the end in mind. So don't start and look forward. You kind of go, well, what do we want this business to be in 3-5 years time? And then we work backwards from there. So we did that day one before the business was launched. We went, what do we want this business to become? And in
terms of revenue, or in terms of other factors?
Started with valuation. So we started, what do we want the business to be worth
based on an exit plan for you, or that kind of thing?
Yeah, so it was basically around a personal net worth target. So it didn't necessarily mean that number of years and then exit. It meant that I personally had a personal net worth target that I wanted to reach, and I was like, at that point in my life, I'd sold obviously the other business, so that I'd put some, that increase my my net worth just by that, and I'm sat there with a target in mind for 4 years, 4 years time, and I'm like, I can't generate that in cash, even with a high pay. Even if I was getting paid, I'm going to make a number up now because this isn't real, but even if I was getting paid £200,000 a year, right, it would still be impossible for me to build the net worth target that I wanted out of it, because you get taxed on a load of it, you spend a lot of it, and then you haven't got anything left over of that. So what I knew was that the fastest way to build net worth is to build a business. Effectively, that's the fastest way to build net worth. And I'd already done that. I'd already got the skills and experience behind me on how to do that. So it was a lot around that. Right? How do I build a personal net worth? Obviously, I've got co-founders in this business, and we're all equal shareholders. But then they'd worked as employees in my previous MSP up to this point, and I was like, this is where I want to go. With my net worth, this would mean the business needs to be worth X. This is what it would mean to you. Are you on board with that? And they're all like, absolutely, yeah.
That's your alignment piece right there, isn't it? All around the outcome at the end, I suppose.
Yeah.
So that was so at that point that you went, oh, hang on a second. So if we're selling individual services and things, this is not going to stack up.
Well, it was a case of having known what I'd done in the previous MSP, how we priced things on the other MSP, and how little some of our clients,
£8 a user or whatever. It's time to increase the. Was it £8 a user? It wasn't.
Back in the early days, we did increase obviously that over time. But we still had clients, and I talked to MSPs about this today. We still had clients in Pyranet by the time. So this was 2019. We still had clients paying us less than £200 a month for services, right? And so I'm like, we cannot achieve what we want to achieve if people are going to pay us £200-300 a month. It's just not possible. So with that starting with the end in mind, we went, well, how many clients can we reasonably expect to take on? If we work out what our valuation should be, it means we need to work out what our net profit or EBITDA number should be, and a multiplier. That gives us, well, what revenue can we do at a reasonable percentage? So everything was calculated, and then that meant, well, if we get X number of clients, how much revenue do we need to generate from those clients? Divide that by the number of clients, divide it by number of months, and then that gave us a number. And I remember the number was £900 a month. That's what we needed to average from clients. It was £900 a month.
That's once you've factored in all your sort of profitability and like operating costs and all the rest of it, roughly around there. Okay.
So given that I knew that previously we've got clients that would spend less than £200 a month, I was like, how are we going to up our value? And our decision to up our value was to make it inclusive. So instead of selling add-ons, bolt-ons, which also from a perspective of a sales situation, businesses do not like. Businesses do not like IT companies going in every month and saying, oh, I know you pay us for our IT support, but by the way, there's this new security product that you need on top of it, right? They hate it because it sounds like we're constantly on the sell all the time and that we haven't got the clients back. And it just rubs the conversations up. It rubs the client up the wrong way. It also means that they're less likely to take actual strategic sit-down conversations with you. Because if they feel every time that you're going sitting down with them, you're just trying to sell them something else, then they're not going to see you as a strategic advisor because they're just going to see you as a salesperson. So our stance was include everything, make it more value packed. We can do more with value if we've got a lot of clients all on the same bundles because we get better rates from our suppliers at that point. Make it so that it's worry free. You don't have to worry about us coming and selling you things. Every time we spot something that you need, we'll just do it and we'll just include it as part of our service. And it's just, that was our decision from day one. We also said from day one we wouldn't take on clients with less than 20 people. Or if we did, they would pay as if they had 20 people. And that was from day one as well.
And so with that jump to triple the amount you're getting monthly from your clients, did you do that in one fell swoop with your existing customers, or was it a ramped?
This was reformed. So this is MSP version 2. So in the previous MSP, that's right, what we were charging. When we started again, we had a blank sheet. However, that does raise another point that I get asked quite a lot because I get people saying, yeah, it's okay for you, Joe, you started again. I would love to start again and I would do exactly that. But we can't do that because we've got a load of existing clients that have been with us for 10, 15, 20 years.
Yes, that was going to be a question. Yeah.
Yeah. So I say, yeah, that's fine. It was clean for us to start, but I did exactly the same thing back at Pyranet in the later years, is that I realized that we had way too many clients and we weren't charging enough. So I said I wanted to go from 120 clients down to 80. So I wanted to carve 40 clients off and I wanted to increase revenue. So we just we looked at the base, we looked at the bottom end of the base, and we went and increased rapidly and ruthlessly to some degree the pricing for all of the bottom end clients. And it was a case of, this is our package. You either go with it or we'll hand you to somebody else that will do it similar to the price that you're paying now. And we churned that base in 6 months. So we basically we decreased our clients by 50% or something nearly, and we increased revenue by 50% over the same period as well.
I'm interested to know this. So how does that factor? When you're basically are you just taking on very few clients now, or is it do you just very carefully select, or how does that work then in terms of sort of new client acquisition? Yeah,
so we have a strategy of one client. We won't take anything more than one client a month. So we trickle clients in, and also we do that to continue to deliver the best service. Like if you're trying to take on too many clients in one go, service it's a distraction from the day-to-day. It's a distraction from the service. And also client onboarding done properly. Yes, we've got tools. Yes, there's automations, but to really do an onboarding for a client, you really need to understand the client, and that does take time. It takes time to get in there in the early days and weeks so that you can fully understand the client. So by us only taking on one client a month, it gives us a month each time to really get a grips of the client and understand them.
What does understanding them at that level practically mean? What does it take? What are you looking for? What are you trying to understand in them?
Yeah, so obviously there's all the tech side of it, but that's pretty vanilla. Everyone will gather gather the tech from them and documentation and things like that. But then it's understanding their business, actually understanding their business, not just about the tech, but what do they do? What do the people do? How do they do it? What makes them special? How do they make money? What are their biggest challenges right now? It's a lot of really getting under the skin of the business and understanding what does that business do. And again, back to the strategic advisor point, what can we help them with? Like, forgetting that we fix their problems and we keep them safe. What can we actually genuinely help them with that moves them forward? Because the other thing is, if we can help our clients and they grow because of things that we can help them, then that's great for us too, because they're growing. So
yeah, very much so. Right. Neil, you must see this all the time, because you're obviously, without doing the whole usecure pitch, part of what your part of the offering is, okay, well, this is a security awareness training. It's something extra that you would add into the bundle. So do you see MSPs approaching this differently in terms of how they price and how they factor that in, and to what level of success?
Yeah, it's a split, right? So if you look at our partners that have been most successful, to be fair, they do what Joe is advocating for. It's having the confidence to say, in modern security, there's all of this ecosystem of different vectors that we need to have to essentially cross over each other's weaknesses, right? So you need the network, you need the human element, you need everything combining together to create a secure ecosystem. If we take one part of that house of cards out, it then tumbles. And so we see more partners having confidence in that messaging, and it's great that their clients get on board with it. They see the value in it. And then when it comes to the licensing, it's then itemized. And it's a complete contradiction of the messaging you've just said, because you're telling them all of these things need to work in conjunction. But then when it comes to actually placing the order, you can pick and choose what you want. So the ones that are more successful are the ones that are being more commercially confident, internally confident in themselves and the value that they can drive. And then the human risk element of it is a very visual, sort of tangible, physical value driver. You can see the training that's being sent, you can see the phishing simulations, whereas sometimes things in the network are a little bit more abstract. And so we still see that, kind of touched on it earlier, almost like inconsistency, where two very similar MSPs with very similar turnover, very similar internal bases can have quite different and wildly different and inconsistent pricing messages and pricing models. So yeah, we're also trying to get partners to see the value in having that commercial confidence to basically say to their clients, in order for us to make you secure, in order for us to do our job as a partner, this is the entire bundle you have to take on board. I was interested as well with Joe. You mentioned you had that £900 magic number when you first started. I imagine what you currently incorporate as part of that licensing model isn't what it was in the first iteration. So I was curious, what did you do in V1, V2, V3 before you got to this current model, which I'm sure will change in the future? What happened in those early iterations that wasn't quite right, and what do you do to change them?
So the thing was, obviously back then in 2019 when we started that, we had we had the exclaimer in, we had exclaimer, some cyber awareness training. We had backups for 365. We had a few core fundamental things in our stack, right? And then over time, this was the challenge, right? And this is the challenge that a lot of people have said that they can't get over, which was a challenge for us earlier as well, is that we kind of promised our clients that we'd have their backs. So we're not going to sell you add-ons and bolt-ons. When you make that promise that we're not going to sell them add-ons and bolt-ons, it only gives you the option of you include it, right? So you have to include it as part of your service. Now, our strategy, our decision making early on was, we'll do that. We'll include it. Yes, it'll eat into our margins, but when it comes to renewals, we'll then adjust the price. So the price will be adjusted based on what they're now getting as part of their service and the costs that we've had to incorporate to bring those things in. But we did have a promise which we've stuck to date, which is, if we think that you need something, we'll do it. Whatever you're paying right now, it will get included. We're not going to charge you any extra, because that would go back to the add-on bolt-on situation immediately at that point. So that's what we did. The way that we did it, and the mistakes that we've made, especially in the early years, is that, if you remember that period between 2019 when we started and 2022, 2023, every product there were so many solutions to so many problems that came out around that time. And so then it was a case of, oh, we need this, now we need this, now we need this, and all these different layers of risk that we're now having to try and protect against, which meant that we were adding so many things very quickly in the space of 2 to 3 years. We were just adding more and more products. And again, back to our promise, we said we'll do that. It eats into our margins with our clients, but we'll do it for the long-term good and for the fact that we're standardizing everything and not risking any of our clients being more vulnerable to a potential threat because we've dealt with it immediately. And so that's the decision we made. The problem that caused is that we were to some degree winging it with the pricing. Like every time we added a few things and then we thought, oh, we'll need to change the pricing. We just notched it up a little bit and guessed at what it should be. There was no real kind of methodology around our pricing at that point. And what that did have an impact on is I watched our margins erode year on year on our managed services. And then I caught it. I was looking at the numbers and I caught it and I was like, yeah, this doesn't work. We can't just keep like making it up as we are doing now. We need to be quite strategic about how we do pricing. We need to be really strategic about what vendors we work with, what pricing we get from vendors, what we can include, what we can't include, when we can include it. So we started to make better decisions that was more structured around real data and real numbers effectively.
Do you see this within the MSP base that you're coaching, Joe? Like, what are the typical mistakes there? Do they make similar ones or anything else?
Yeah, again, it's the model that we've applied. There's not everyone is doing that. Again, it's something I advocate for, but if you're going to do it, I feel like you should do it the way that we do. And there's not a lot of MSPs that are doing it exactly the same way that we do, though. I think that, yes, it's really common. When I do talk to MSPs at events and I ask a few quick questions, because the stack has become the kind of phrase that people use to mean all of their included products. So I'll say to somebody, what does your stack look like? They'll tell me, and they'll say, how much does that cost for all of that on a per user basis or per device basis? They'll tell me the cost. And then I'll kind of divide that and multiply it. I'll divide that to work out what 20%, if they were pricing it where that was 20%, what they should be selling their per user pricing at. And quite often it shocks people because they're like, oh, we're not charging anywhere near that. And I'm like, well, the cost of all of your included services are coming to 30-40% of your revenue that you're generating. That gives you absolutely no room for margin at that point. You still need to pay for your team. So you've got there's no margin in that at all. So there are some quick things like that people can do, but they just have never thought about it. They've never really thought about it like that.
Why does that get overlooked, and why is pricing such a struggle? Because I forget the exact stat now, but it's that there's a huge percentage of MSPs, particularly smaller ones, that aren't running even at profitability a lot of the time.
Yeah.
What do you put that down to?
That's now 9%, by the way. So according to SLI, that's 9%. It used to be quoted at about 20 something percent, but there's been a recalculation, and it's 1 in 10 pretty much aren't making any money from MSPs. That's
bonkers, isn't it?
Yeah, but in terms of that pricing thing, I think there is an element of just people not understanding, not understanding what margins they need to make on these things. So it's just a lack of understanding. It gets hidden quite well because especially smaller businesses, when you're starting and you're growing, owner-led, owners doing a lot of work in it. They're not paying themselves, particularly in the UK anyway, not paying themselves a salary out of the business. They're paying themselves dividends. So they're looking at the profitability, but they're not really factoring in how much it should be to pay for them. And if you're under, even until you get to about £1 million in revenue, that number changes the system completely. So if they're less than £1 million in revenue, or definitely less than £500,000, they might be looking at the profitability, going, "Oh, we're a profitable business," but reality, you're not if you were paying yourself a proper wage. And so I think it goes under the radar for some businesses, that they think they're profitable and they think it will work and they think that it can scale with the numbers that they've got. So when you challenge them on pricing and they go, "Well, we're profitable," but it's not until you start to explain that what is happening now, it will not scale. You've got to build operational teams. You've got to build a sales team. And so as you do that, you don't have the luxury of going, well, there's no other operational costs in the business. It's just you as an owner. So
What are their reactions when you have these conversations?
when you explain it, people get it. But until somebody's explained it to them, that you're giving yourself a ceiling, you're giving yourself a point where you won't be able to go any further, and suddenly you're going to realize that the business will not sustain profitability when you start to add real costs in, real operational costs in. They just until they hit it, they won't realize, and then when they hit it, they start to go, oh, we need to reprice. By that point, it's quite late on in the game, and it's a bigger challenge. So it's much better to understand this stuff early rather than have to react later down the line.
You kind of touched on it. Sorry, James. You touched on it earlier about how you were eroding into your margin almost by accident, Joe, by incorporating these extra bolt-ons. So what sort of, I suppose, triggers do you have in place to make sure that that's kept in check and that you're not going to go too far gone and then have to over-calibrate to make up for it?
Yeah, so the simplest thing for that is understanding what percentage of pricing that we will spend on stack. So at one point when I realized, so the cost of our stack was going up periodically. 1 year it was 19%, then it went to 22%, then it went to 25%, then it went to 27%. And I'm like, oh, this is the problem. The cost of our stack from our pricing, from our revenue that we're generating, it just keeps going up and up and up because we just keep adding more and we've not adjusted our pricing properly. Also, we were a victim of doing things like 3-year contracts at fixed prices for the whole term. So that then meant especially back then, inflation was crazy for a period of time as well. And so, and wage inflation. And so we'd locked in prices for 3 years for people where all of a sudden everything else was going up around us and their pricing was not going up. So that caught us out. We've sorted that. We now have regular price increases baked into multi-year deals. But one of the things I realized is that we need to have a fixed percentage. We can't go over whatever our price is. We have got no more than 20% of that price can be spent on stack effectively, and that was locked in, and that ruled our decisions. Then if someone got excited from an event and saw something and went, we need to buy that, if it didn't fit, it didn't
that
fit,
never happens, Joe.
Yeah. So if it didn't fit in the numbers, it wasn't going in. Now what we did to make sure that we didn't lose sight of our early goals and mission, to make sure that if something was needed, we'd get it in. The one benefit you get from having clients and growing a client base and having vendor relationships is if you grow your client base, you grow your user numbers, and you have a good relationship with vendors whereby they know that they get all your business, not some of the business. We're not selling it to 2 or 3 companies. We're saying if we're committed to you, you get our entire base, you get all of our clients, all of our users, right? So that puts us in a much better negotiating position. Most vendors are priced on tiered systems anyway, so the more you grow, the lower the cost. So what that does is it affords us scope to add more things in, because if we've got like 12 or 13 kind of products and services packaged in, you knock 10 pence per each of those. That's £1.30. That's £1.30 a month per user, effectively, that you've just got back. So if you can then go and find another product that's £1.30, £1.40 or whatever, you can then go and add that in. Our margins have been kind of protected because we're keeping it the same. We're just reducing costs on our existing stuff and introducing more features. Now, what's brilliant about that is that because our clients have got to grips with we provide everything. If they go and look for another provider like us, they can't just go and find somebody else. They've got to go through and making sure they're getting a like for like comparison. So now it's if they're not modeled like us and have not got the same strategic pricing benefits that we've got, they'll go and suddenly there's all your IT support plus 13 bolt-ons at an extra £3, £4 per user for each bolt-on, and they just don't look anywhere near as competitive as us.
There's a few things here, isn't there? It's having the confidence to initially do that, to go with a higher value pricing. Then there's the sort of the bundling element of it, so having the confidence to go for a one size fits all. Then you get to that point where you can negotiate better deals, and it all starts to play in together, doesn't it? Nicely. Joe, you've given us loads of great advice there. Thank you so much for that. Nihil, any final points to add before we dive into our first segment?
I know that the podcast is all about the human element, but I really like how that's quite, and Joe, I think you mentioned this earlier as well, quite a cold, numbers-driven approach to this, because we're talking about numbers, and it's very easy to let emotion about, like I said, exciting new product or pressure from a customer then cause you to make short-term decisions. But if you have a structure in place that's number-driven, that then takes away any of the, you can't have hurt feelings about that because it is a structure that's been put in place. So yeah, I really, really like that model. I think that's great.
Yeah, excellent point. Our segment is what would you do? So this is where I trawl Reddit looking for posts, recent posts. This is, for those of you who don't know, I'm sure most of you know about the Reddit forums, but it's /MSP, which can be volatile at times, but this one isn't too bad. So this is a post I'd like your opinion on, Joe. So someone posted recently, and I'll read it out to you. It'll be on the screen if you're watching the video of this later on. So my client found the online price for hardware I'd quoted with my standard markup. They sent me the cheaper link. I panicked. I said it was a mistake, blamed my supplier, dropped the price 20%, and threw in 5 free support hours. The client's partner emailed, I trusted you 100% and never checked your quotes. What does this say about everything we've bought so far? 222 comments on that one, Joe. What would you say to that person about that situation?
Okay, so yeah, been there. Obviously, done this. I didn't do that, but I've been in the same sort of situation. Now, the first thing I would say, which predates the issue, is be transparent from your clients from day one. We get asked often when we take on a client, oh, can you also do if we buy laptops, can we buy them from you? 100%. Yeah. And that's the best way to do it. Come to us. We can do it. We can do your procurement, takes it off your plate for you. We make sure things are right when you get it. Everything's right. If there's anything wrong, we deal with it. However, please note, if you go online retailers do nothing. They have no people behind it. Everything's fully automated. What will happen is you will go on, you've got to try and find the spec. You've got to try and find what's right for your business. You've got to try and assess all of that. You're going to go and place an order, place a credit card into it. It's going to get shipped to you. It's going to get delivered, and then you're going to deal with it at that point. Or you're going to call us and we're going to come out. If we've got to come out, we've got to spend more time, because if we come out and do it on site, we can't have prepped it. We would have prepped it with our suppliers. It would have been quicker. It would have been more efficient. So bearing in mind, you're not going to talk to anyone. No one's going to touch it. It's all a bunch of automated bots that's going to happen. With us, you tell us what you want, we deal with it. Don't go looking for specs. Don't worry about that. We'll know your business. We'll know how to do it for you. It will not cost you the same as it will cost you online. They obviously can do it at razor thin margins. They're not going to add anything on it, maybe a couple of percent. We can't do that. We're a local business. We're there to support you. We're there to add value. We are going to make a margin when we supply you kit. Does that make sense? Yes, that I understand that you've got to do it for a reason, right? Now, if you get that transparent conversation done from day one, then they understand that when they get a quote, there's no point going and price shopping on an online thing, because yes, it's going to be cheaper, but if they go and buy it from somewhere else, they're not going to get the same level of service. It's not all of that managed experience. So it starts with that. I will tell you a quick story though about a very similar situation we had, whereby this was Pyranet days. We had a client where we went out, a new client. We went out and we looked at some hardware. It was some server storage was getting full, and they needed a way of dealing with it. And we suggested doing a NAS, connecting it to the server. It could dual purpose for their Macs. So we did a lot of research, worked out what the best solution was, put this scope together, sent them the quote with what they needed. They called us up and said, we found this product online cheaper. And I said, okay. And I said, you with another IT company at the moment, you're talking about moving to us for us to do this for you. We've spent days researching what needs to be done and how to do it in the best possible way to give you the right outcome. Yes, we do charge a margin on products that we supply to you. That's kind of part and parcel of the research that we do. We do a lot of work for that. You could buy it online, go and do it, but we're not going to help you. We will not take you on as a client, because that just shows me the depth of the relationship that you're looking for. To save, 100 quid or whatever, a couple hundred quid on something. And they said, well, you should have put it into installation, or you should have charged us for your research. I said, I'm not being funny, but nobody's paying for research. There's no way that I would quote you for us to do a day's worth of research for you to pay that. We accept that we'll do that, and I'm going to give you a quote. There's going to be some margin in it. But if you see the value in what we've done, then you'll pay it. And she apologised and placed the order.
And she did. Okay, that's right. Because often that is, like you say, that's a really good indicator of, is this a company that I want to work with? But perhaps they just saw the error of their ways. And like you say, I've never seen research as a line item. So to close off our interview, Joe, just a quick one from you. If you weren't in IT, what would you be doing?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I've been destined to be in IT since I was at school. But
Okay.
As pre-show, we were chatting about football. I'm a big passion. I've got some football shirts behind me, but I'm big passionate. Been into football since a kid. So nowadays, every kid wants to be a YouTuber. Back when I was at school, I wanted to be a footballer. So I'd say that I should have been a footballer, but I'm now in IT.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay. Well, listen. Do you want to do a quick shout out? Anywhere you'd like us to direct eyeballs? What are you up to these days? Just do a quick shout on where we can find you and where we can get in touch with you.
Yeah, best place really to find me and to communicate with me is on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on there anyway, so always putting my thoughts and ideas, insights, and anything that can add value to the MSP community goes on there really. I've also got a YouTube channel for mainly around Halo PSA. Stuff, automation, things like that. So that's MSP Blueprint on YouTube. But yeah, connect to me on LinkedIn. That'd be good.
Fantastic. Joe, been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Nihil, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, James. Pleasure as always.
All right, we'll catch you around very soon. All right, take care, guys.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.